Are you crying?
What's that?
Are you crying?
Am I crying? No, I'm not crying. You're crying.
It's okay to cry. People cry.
It's great, but I'm not crying.
I think we all cried a little bit on Saturday night. Not because we were mad, not because we were angry, not even because we were disappointed. We were just sad. Sad that the Gabatoir may no longer be the fortress it was, but maybe it still is, and it just wasn't our night. After all, we played the undefeated first place team on the ladder, and they're undefeated for a reason, let's face it, and it rained. Not only did it rain, it poured. There was lightning nearby, not close enough to stop the game, which would have been handy at about 10 minutes in. But you know what? A lot of the boys had a decent crack, but they just weren't good enough in the wet, and the other team was. And it's obviously take out of this, there's still 17 games to go, at a minimum. So it's not all doom and gloom yet. Or is it? Listen on to find out. All right, well, welcome to this week. And yes, we've all cried a few tears since last night, I have no doubt about. I know I did at the very end of the game. And I switched off my TV about 1 second after the final siren, stormed off to bed, and did not think about football until about 4 o'clock this afternoon on Sunday. And I don't know if Al's in the same boat, but I reckon he's about to tell me welcome to the show, Al.
Thank you, Ash. Always a pleasure to be back here. Apologies for missing last week. My little fellow was very sick right at the last minute, so I had to let you know that I was going to pull out. And apologies to our guest, Neil. I would have loved to have had a chat with him. Hopefully we can do that later on another time. But it just didn't work out right at the last minute. But good to be back.
It's good to hear your dulcet tones again, that is for sure. I mean, you have been described as the Dennis Cometti of this show while I'm the Kelly Underwood.
Geez.
So,
oh, mate, I didn't realise you were getting that much brutal feedback.
I'm copping the Kelly Underwood comparison from my family. So
That's true. But you're at least you know the team names. So
yeah, well, as we know, I got Hugh McCluggage and Jared Lyons confused a few weeks ago. So
yeah, you did.
Yeah.
So it kind of solidifies your role on that one, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, that's right. And I was going for the Maroon team last night.
It's so much easier than just saying the location name, isn't it?
Yeah, but the club used to be called the Maroons back in the day. How much easier would that have been?
Yeah, before the Gorillas.
Yeah, I guess one of the things that came up in a short little phone call I had from a relative last night was same old Brisbane, same old Fitzroy, and they supported Fitzroy in the very dark later days. They're a bit younger than me.
Yep.
And they're only used to Fitzroy losing every week, so they think that Brisbane are going down the same path at the moment, which is pretty sad to cop because
yeah, that's a bit rough, I think. But obviously everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But I think it's a bit too early to be doom and gloom, I think.
Yeah, well, I was talking to, so I had a friend over because I helped a friend buy a car yesterday in Melbourne and sort of chauffeured her around a bit. And I said, look, you might as well come back, watch the footy because you're a Cat supporter. Probably, come over and watch your team lose and we can, whatever. And then, whatever happens next, you can go home or whatever.
Yeah.
Especially if your team wins. I don't want to hear about it. But we're sort of talking and during the game, and she's like, "Well, Brisbane aren't playing badly. They're kicking pretty badly, but it's wet. It's really wet." And like Geelong, I guess, just sort of. Well, they had to bet. They just played better in the conditions, and then she sort of said to me, "Look, I don't know a lot about everything in the league, but what I do know is that Brisbane's played, other than North Melbourne, every team they've played has been in the top 8 at some point this year, except for other than Collingwood as well, but they are the reigning premiers.
Yeah.
So Brisbane have played good teams all year, and they played Freo away, which is a tough road trip. But yeah, like, so she was a bit more upbeat than what I was. I was a bit flat by the reaction of a lot of supporters who were calling for season over. Sack Fagan, sack Berry, sack Charlie Cameron.
I don't think that my expectations have changed for the season, but I'm not writing the season off completely. Well, I guess you could interpret what that means, though. But so I don't think we're going to win the flag this year, but I do think that we'll still make finals.
Yeah, so I did a ladder predictor this afternoon, about an hour and a half or so ago, for the rest of the season, because I just wanted to see where my mindset was.
Mm.
And I had us finishing 8th.
Okay.
And winning our first final, but losing our second final. And I think, I guess,
feels about right to me.
Yeah. Look, obviously, I'd love to win the grand final. I'd love to be there again on grand final day and not catch COVID this time.
Yeah.
But I'm not feeling it. I think there are some flaws in our makeup, and they're being exposed this year.
Yeah, I agree.
And one of the things I thought about was, and I don't know if this is accurate or not at all, but I feel like in previous seasons we've had a pretty generous fixture based on our ladder positions from the years before.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel that as well or not.
I think certainly early on, our first few years of finals under Fagan, that was definitely the case. We took a big step up pretty quickly, but I think we've finished pretty high the last few years. So I think the teams that we were always going to play twice, and I guess that's how you determine how hard your fixture is, which teams you have to play twice and which ones you don't.
Yeah.
We've been playing a lot of the teams that have been around the mark of winning the flag or being close to winning the flag. So I think that's pretty much the same. I think the only difference is we started off this season with a particularly hard draw compared, they weren't as spaced out.
That's I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. We've had a tough early draw. And you can say in theory and on paper it's going to get easier over the next few weeks. Obviously, we don't know where the Giants are at after they lost yesterday. They didn't look like the team that they looked like in previous weeks, and they're probably not going to have Toby Green. So in my opinion, that's now become a 50-50 away game. I'd give us a little bit more chance than what I did a week ago.
I think it's Toby and Hogan that both got suspended.
Oh, did say Hogan got suspended? I think
I'm pretty sure they said it was definitely two Giants players got suspended. One of them was definitely Toby Green.
I knew
the other one was Hogan.
I knew they were both under scrutiny, but I looked at the Hogan thing this morning when I was having breakfast, and I thought, probably a fine based on.
I just double checked. So Toby Green and Jesse Hogan have both been given a 1 match. So I don't know if they get off, but they've both been suspended for a week.
Yeah, I think Hogan probably maybe they'll appeal because I see they'll have grounds to appeal, but the Toby Green one not. But look, for us, beneficially for us, both guys not playing. I mean, Hogan's having a season and a half at the moment. Green's not at his best, but he's that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's. Yeah, look, you don't want to play against him. But obviously, you don't want to see guys getting suspended for hitting blokes in the head. But you don't want to. Obviously, you want to play against the best players to prove how good your team is. But geez, if their best player isn't in their lineup and their leading goal kicker's not in their lineup, you take that as a win.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, looking forward. I mean, I'm a bit more optimistic about the Giants game than I was even going into the Cats game. I knew the Cats game was going to be tricky. It always is. The Cats are always tricky, no matter if they're going well or if they're going poor. They always give us a hard time.
Well, the other thing is, and I said this the other night on Facebook. Like last night, I said, well, it was 13th or 12th playing first because they were first by the time the game started, and first won. So realistically, on paper, that was what the expectation should have been from most people in football because it was at our home ground. and people were of the opinion that Geelong haven't really beaten anyone of substance yet. Well, we should be favourites, but I guess with the Giants, the other thing too, Sam Taylor, their best key defender, probably in the top 3 key defenders in the comp, not playing as well due to that really horrid head injury that he got the previous week.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the footage of the aftermath of that, but that was
No, I didn't see that one.
So he was having convulsions on the ground on the field. They had paramedics come out. They stopped play for about 10 minutes or so. It was really disturbing. And anyone who whinges about the AFL clamping down on head contact, and it was incidental. It was a pretty similar incident to what happened to Tom Stewart last night.
Yep.
But anyone who goes, oh, well, the AFL is going soft and, men aren't men anymore. Have a look at what happened to Sam Taylor. He was in really serious trouble, and that was really upsetting to see. And, yeah, I mean, you don't want to see guys miss through those sort of injuries. But, again, that's going to be really helpful to us next week.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of it's a tricky one because you don't want to see those things happen, but at the same time, it is an advantage to us.
Well, that's right. And, and we know how it feels because we've, Kadeem Coleman obviously has been a big loss for us. Connor McKenna
we've had a rancid start with injuries to the start of the season.
And Connor McKenna on a much smaller scale, a couple of other guys here and there, and even like a guy who hasn't even played a game for us, Zane Zakostelski, he's hasn't even pulled on a boot yet because he got injured before he had the chance. But and obviously the Big O was a big talking point last night with his
he was kind of smashing it in the first quarter, and then he got injured in the second quarter, and then that's kind of when we fell off as well. So
so quarter time, I was in the Facebook group and I was just going, oh, Big O's having a blinder, 13 hit outs, 2 clearances, 2 intercepts, blah blah blah. Mm-hmm. And then that happened, and I'm like, oh man, I so feel bad for this guy. I don't know if I've jinxed him or, it was just rotten luck. It was friendly fire. There was no malice in the incident, but that changed the whole dynamic of the game for both teams.
Yeah,
I didn't know much about Toby Conway before the game, but Neil did fill me in that he's seen a little bit of him and rates him as a good, fairly good sort of ruckman. I thought he once Big O was out of the game, he dominated proceedings. Obviously, Joe Danaher, Josh Dunkley are not full-time ruckmen.
It was kind of crazy seeing Dunkley doing some ruck contests, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I know he's done it with the Dogs occasionally, but it's still weird.
Yeah, and one of the commentators was saying at one stage, "Oh, Jared Berry might have to do it," and I mean, I didn't hate it, but I think he's a little bit taller than Dunkley anyway. But I don't know if he's ever done it. I mean, Hipwood, we've talked about Hipwood in the ruck before. So we got told that has 20 odd career hitouts, but it's not really his thing.
No, not at all.
But that changed the dynamic of our forward setup as well, and it just didn't function well enough, in my opinion. It was dysfunctional. When Dunkley went into the ruck, our midfield obviously lost a guy, and he wasn't permanent rucking; he was just pinch hitting here and there. But it lost a bit of its dynamic, and and there wasn't really a guy who could take Dunkley's place. No one else does that role in the team.
Yeah. It was a rough night all around. I mean, as soon as we were getting to the Gabba, it started raining lightly, but it was, obvious that it was going to be an interesting night wet weather-wise, and it started to pick up even more as the first quarter went on. And it was interesting. I mean, the scoreline kind of tells the story, doesn't it? I mean, you can say, we kicked 37, they kicked 63, obviously, but the way that they were kicked is very interesting. So they kicked 9 goals, 9 behinds, equaling 63. So that's 18 shots a goal.
Yep.
Whereas we kicked 37, made up of 4 goals, 13 behinds.
Yeah, and I mean, there's been 2 arguments about that. One has been, our forwards can't kick. They need, they need to get the assistant coaches to teach them how to kick. But then there's been the other people saying, well, a lot of them were rushed, or they
And they were, to
Yeah,
be
yeah,
honest. A lot of them were, because the end that I was sitting at, which was kind of just off to the side of one of the goals, and most of the action seemed to be happening at that set of goals, particularly. It was the one where we were kicking to for the first quarter slash
yeah,
third quarter, and it was a lot of them were getting rushed behind. There was definitely some really bad misses and a few like hit the posts and all that sort of stuff. But I feel like there
yeah,
was at least half of them were rushed.
yeah. So I'm just pulling it up now to get the exact figures,
Yeah.
because I don't want to jinx myself and make up a stat that doesn't exist.
Hmm.
So apparently we only had 5 rushed.
Okay.
Yeah, so um,
So 8 missed shots then.
yeah, it's interesting. We led for 18 minutes longer than Geelong, but our biggest lead was only 15 points. So that's to say 2 goals.
Yeah.
Which would have look early on. We got that probably that 2 goal and a bit lead
Hmm.
before they scored. We probably should have had 4 goals up on the board at that stage.
Yeah.
Um, whether that's the wet conditions or not, I mean,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's not easy. I mean, people were sort of saying, "Well, why don't we just kick it long?" I think, well, kicking it long when like look how many times, and unfortunately, I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Jared Berry because he really tried his guts out last night, but
Yeah.
how many times did he kick it out of bounds or out on the full? You know, and
Yeah.
because
A lot.
he was the guy trying to kick it long.
Yeah.
And I said to people, look, I think that's a high risk, low percentage option. And I know traditional people don't like the handball game, but I feel, and even when I've coached footy, I've always felt in wet or windy or whatever conditions, handballs or short low kicks are a higher percentage option because you're not letting the conditions take control of the ball. But
Yeah. Uh,
um,
one
yeah,
thing that people kind of forget about with wet weather footy as well. So everyone just assumes that it'll just affect their ability to like hold onto the ball because it gets slippery and all that sort of stuff. Yeah, there is that element of it. But if anyone listening has ever been down at the local park and had been playing footy when the ball gets wet, or even club footy or whatever, you know that the ball gets heavier after time because it soaks in
yes,
the water, and
correct.
you can't kick as far because the ball is so heavy.
Yeah,
You
and
know,
look,
it's yeah, it's just people don't seem to realize that, or that they forget it, or they've never experienced it. It's not just it's slippery, you can't hold onto it. It gets so much heavier, which means it can't travel as far.
yeah, and look, Geelong did a couple of penetrating kicks, but not as many as our supporters made out.
Mm,
Um, and as well, they sort of, I don't think their forward line was functioning too well either. But interestingly, so a guy who was probably in a way, one of their best players,
mm,
had a very similar night to a guy who was probably our best player. So Jared Berry for us and Ollie Henry for Geelong. Now he kicked a couple of goals, and
yeah,
he was probably the main target and the guy who got most hands on the ball inside forward 50 for them. But he dropped probably 5 or 6 absolute sitters of marks, completely ran under a couple of other balls and got
mm,
spoiled a couple of other times. But he's probably won the game for him with those couple of goals he kicked at crucial times.
yeah,
And that, that's the same thing with Jared Berry. Yeah, he's had a massive crack, played his heart out, but kicking the football in the wet conditions let him down. One guy's dropped a lot of marks, the other guy's kicked it out of bounds a lot.
and also Geelong was very lucky with. So they were kicking the ball off the ground a lot, and they got
Yeah,
really lucky about where that ball ended up most of the time.
yeah, and kicking the ball off the ground is 1,000% down to luck.
Yeah,
And even like, I don't know if you watch soccer at all. I try not to, but sometimes there's nothing else to watch. 400 channels and nothing to watch, right? But
yeah,
I do occasionally watch it, and like sometimes I watch the Socceroos because everybody tells me it's the Australian thing to do, and some of the conditions they play in the tropical countries against Asian countries, and when they play up north against some of the lesser known countries as well, because they won't get as big a crowd as they would in Sydney or Melbourne.
mm,
Um, you watch them in the wet, and kicking a soccer ball around is just as hard. And that thing's round. It's not oblong or oval or whatever bloody shape our football
That's
is.
what I was going to raise as well. I mean, it's much easier to kick a round ball on the ground than it is, an
Yeah.
oval shaped footy.
Yeah, and
And
look,
it's soaking wet as well.
yeah, well, that's it. And I don't want it to come across that I'm just making excuses and saying, well, shit happens, bad luck, because there were some glaring things in the teams, the way the team functioned, that do need work. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
And most of them have been there all year. But but on the same hand, I don't want to be singling out guys and picking on them, because I'm sure those guys already know.
Yeah, of course.
And I'm sure Jared Berry knows that he kicked the ball out of bounds a lot, but I also hope he knows that he did have a decent crack. Like Calamachi was another guy. He had a real big crack.
Yeah.
Got unlucky with a few things. Like, I think it was a mark he took, and as he landed, a teammate pinched it out of his hands. Might have been Fletcher.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, and
hit the goals.
Yeah, and as well, like Berry had that shot at goal that it landed and hit the base of the post. I mean, that's you can't complain about his effort there, but that's just bad luck, rotten bad luck.
Yeah.
That's not bad kicking. That's bad luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say though, whoever Tyson Stengel's opponent was, probably should have tightened up on him a little bit.
Yeah, just a bit.
But having said that, the guy's also a currently reigning All-Australian small forward. He might be 2 times All-Australian now. I'm not 100% on that.
So I went to the game, and I brought along. So I went with my dad, my partner, my sister, her partner, and then my best friend. And my best friend is an Eagles fan, but
you've said that. Yeah,
he doesn't really keep track of the teams too much and all that sort of stuff. So he didn't really know any of the Geelong players. And as they were doing the warm ups at the beginning, he commented about how everyone looks like a baby out there. But that's just because we're in our 30s now, and we're older than most of the players on the lists. Not all, but most.
Yeah.
Anyway, he pointed out Tyson Stengel because he was a bit smaller than the other guys.
Yeah.
And he's like, who's that little guy? And I was like, that's the little guy that's going to tear us apart tonight. And sure enough.
Yeah. I know. Look, I know and understand why Adelaide let him go. It's on the public record. We don't need to talk about it. He made mistakes. Obviously, Adelaide's culture and Geelong's culture are vastly different.
Yep.
Geelong obviously has a much older, when he went to their club, had a much older leadership group, and hopefully have sorted that stuff out, got it out of his system, and getting away from a couple of his mates who were involved in that scene as well has probably helped him. His football's gone through the roof, but yeah, geez, he's a good pickup for Geelong a couple of years ago.
Oh, definitely. And I just checked his height because I was like, oh, geez, we called him little fella. He's probably, most of those guys are probably taller than me. No, I'm 10 centimeters taller than him. So that's all good.
Yeah. So, yeah, I take great pride in being taller than Lockie Neal, Charlie Cameron, or about the same as Charlie Cameron, but Lockie Neal and Dane Zorko and old mate Louis Taylor, who we love.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, big Taylor fan. I'd love to chat to him one day, actually. That'd be great.
Yeah.
A lot of good stories.
I might slide into his DMs. I've done that a little bit lately, and getting
mixed results.
Yeah, getting a little bit of lukewarm response from some people, and others are like, "Oh, look, not now, but later." Yeah, I don't think it's all doom and gloom out of that game. We're beaten by a much better coached team on the night.
Yeah,
obviously their players. And look, I live in Geelong, and it rains here all the bloody time. It's horrible.
Yeah, like I said before, I'm definitely not doom and gloom, and I'm not not pointing the blame game or anything like that. But it did make me kind of readjust my expectations for the season, and not throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. Just be like, okay, well, I don't think it's going to be a premiership year this year.
Yeah.
But I do think we'll go pretty far because, like we said earlier, we had a lot of really tough opponents very early on, and we were in a grand final last year. That's kind of to be expected. But I think that we'll go through some green patches and then some blue patches this year. I think it's going to be a bit of a roller coaster season, but I think the future looks bright. I mean, we've got some great draft prospects coming in at the end of the year. Two of them we know for sure, or at least we can highly expect a specific two guys to
Yeah.
come in. Who knows how many other kids will get in, or maybe there's trade prospects. We don't know. That's what's exciting about October and November.
Yeah, well, that's right.
But there's a long season to go as well.
Yeah, and there's guys that obviously you're always going to have the Victorian clubs coming for guys who are out of contract or soon to be out of contract.
Definitely.
And look, generally you're going to keep those guys if you've got a pretty successful club, but you're going to lose some along the way.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be silly to expect that we're going to keep all of them because it's impossible to keep all of them. I mean, I can make speculations on individual guys, but we'll find out sooner or later. And I think we'll find out with the two big ones that are obviously, Jared Berry, Hugh McCluggage. I think we'll find out before the season ends. And what I suspect, I'll give you my theory. My theory is that they have already re-signed and the club is holding on to the announcement of that good news for a rainy day, or if something, less cheerful happens later on in the season, then they'll put that out as a good kind of pick me up for the fans. I think that's what I think has happened.
Yeah, but look, Essendon did that a lot during that drug saga. I can't think of any other thing to call it because that's what the media tagged it as. But like they would come out with guy number 42 on their list just re-signed for 2 years, and it was like the fans were like, "Whoa, how good is this?" Everyone else is like, "Yeah, right, whatever, mate." But they're probably like the buy round, or say we lose a Q clash. We got two of them this year. We might lose one and win one.
Yep.
In my ladder predictor, I had us winning at home and losing away. History shows that the Suns are pretty good at home, especially this year. Not as good away, but they've also played some good teams away. But we might lose a Q clash and everyone is down and out because we lost to our rivals down the road. And suddenly, Jared Berry's just signed for 3 more years.
Yeah, exactly. But also, we lost to Q Clash last year and we made a grand final. So
yeah,
you never know, mate. It's a long and interesting season, and the season gets longer as well because they keep adding new rounds to it.
Yeah, and someone was saying last night or this morning, and it might have been on Reddit. So,
here we go.
Yeah, no, look, it's nothing. And they've said it actually wasn't one of the. So half of this I saw on Reddit, and then someone else was talking about the same thing elsewhere. So I'm going to combine the two. So it was look, generally to finish top 4, you're going to lose about 6 or 7 games for the year.
Yeah,
on average in recent history. And we've lost 4. And then on another form of social media, someone said the same thing, but then said, and I personally am not one to say, well, what happened 20-something years ago doesn't mean it's going to happen now. But 2001, we were in actually a worse position at this time of the season than what we are now.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of people forget that.
We also had probably the greatest I would say the greatest playing list in our club's history, at least. I think Hawthorn of the second half of the 80s was probably the best I've ever seen, but our early 2000s was at least as good as them. And obviously they were able.
Well, the proof's in the pudding there because we had a much higher ceiling of success than they did. Because remember, a lot of theirs was theoretical. I mean, they had their undefeated season, they got their 2000 premiership. But they didn't. I mean, they were in the 2001 grand final, but they didn't really do much more than that, though. I mean, like they were.
Yeah. So you're talking about Essendon there.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Yeah. So Essendon, like they underachieved, I guess. But if you look at us, so you go back to '95, the Bears made the finals. They narrowly lost to the Premier in the first week of the finals. There's only a couple of goals. '96 made a prelim, I think.
Yep.
Lost that to the eventual Premier.
Yeah.
97 scraped into the finals, but there was trouble with the coaches and whatever. 98 was the anomaly.
Don't you love that people used to, and they still kind of put an asterisk on, our dominance in the three-peat era. and they just go, "Oh, you were just so good because you were two teams mashed together, so you had the best of both." And it was like,
Yeah.
well, actually, a lot of the stars came from the Bears, and the Bears were playing finals when they got merged. So
Yeah.
they weren't. It wasn't like two failing teams colliding together, and then take the best and the best, because we didn't really get much from Geelong. I mean, we got Chris. Oh, sorry, not from Geelong, from Fitzroy, because we had Chris
Eight-
Johnson was probably the
8 players
star
came
one.
across, but yeah.
Yeah,
But
he was the best of
yeah,
those.
Chris Johnson was the only one who really sort of stuck around. But so, yeah, to extend by what I was saying, we made probably, I think it was either a semi or a prelim in 99, semi in 2000, and then the 4 grand finals in a row.
Yeah.
That's 10 years with 9 final series out of 10 years. So that was a bloody good side. A lot of those guys that played in the premiership were recruited in 91, 92, 93 when Robert Walls was the coach.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about the development Robert Walls did. And I think we might find with this group, because Chris Fagan won't coach forever.
No.
He may not coach for much longer. He may coach for long. We don't know this, but let's just assume he's not getting any younger.
Well, he's contracted for the rest of this season and another season.
So let's
at the end of 2025.
let's just say he says at the end of his next contract or his current contract, all right, that'll do me. I've done a lot of all that I can with these boys and haven't taken them any further than I could. Or he's got a premiership, which is what we all want.
Yep.
He might say, well, that'll do me. I'm nearly 70 or 65 or whatever.
Yep.
And another guy comes in and wins a flag straight away. Well, this is the Robert Walls development of the Bears players that went on to win a flag or 3 flags. You got Chris Scott did the same thing with Geelong.
Yeah.
We might have a guy that does that. And if anyone says that Chris Fagan didn't do the work to develop these guys or any of his coaching staff that he's had, who generally have been pretty solid throughout his time at the club, other than a couple of changes here and there, you've got to pay the credit to those guys as well for developing the list that will hopefully ultimately get a premiership, whether they're still coaching or there's a new guy coming in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, say hypothetically, 2025 comes, the season finishes, we haven't won a flag, but Chris Fagan goes, like you said, I think I've done all I can with this group. I'm going to go and work on the development of the upcoming Tasmania team, which I think a lot of people suspect that he's going to be involved in some way or shape or form at some stage. I think it's the work that he's done shouldn't be measured in, like how many flags or anything we've achieved in that time. But I think the pride that he's brought back to the club internally and the respect that he's brought back to the club externally can never really be you can't really overstate how important that's been and how great that's been.
Yeah, and even the huge cultural shift from where we were, I'm going to say probably from like 2011 to 2016, so what's that, 6-7 year period. The culture of the club there to what it became under Fagan and under David Noble when he was at the club, Swanee, Crowley and all those guys that are all part of it, but also like with the leaders we've had at the club. And I don't care what other people say about Dave Zorko, he has helped grow the culture. Lockie Neal, without a doubt, Harris Andrews, a lot of those other guys, Hugh McCluggage, who's, he's in the leadership group and a vice captain for a reason. These guys have changed the culture of our football club.
Definitely.
Immensely. And
someone that doesn't get enough plaudits, I think, is Andrew Crowley. You mentioned his name.
Yes.
The amount of work that he does with the players on and off the field and behind the scenes, the fans don't really see a huge amount of him.
Yeah.
But the people in the know exactly what he does and how much impact he has on the playing base. And I think he's a very key cog in the amount of work that is put into getting the players comfortable and building the culture and ensuring that everyone sticks around and for the long term.
Yeah, and that's something that does, as you said, it gets sort of missed in in the mix a bit, where a lot of these people behind the scenes, I mean, and medical staff as well, and
Oh, definitely.
our strength and conditioning and recovery guys. I mean, the commentators last night spoke glowingly about Lincoln McCarthy, about what he's been able to do, and they threw it to Hodgie, and I thought Hodgie played a flat bat. I was disappointed. They're like, "Oh, Hodgie, what is it that makes Queensland so good for guys who've had a lot of injuries?" And he, of all people, got a couple of years out of his footy career when he was pretty much done.
Yeah.
From living up there, I thought he tried a little bit too hard to be neutral, but you could feel he really wanted to say, "Well, yeah, it's just everything about that place makes guys want to get on the field and want to be on the training track."
Yeah, and like those are two really good examples, but there's so many more examples of that as well.
Joe Danaher, even Dane Beams. Like Dane Beams had his injury troubles. Stephen Martin, when he came to the club, he had a lot of injuries in Melbourne. He had a lot of injuries with us early on. Yeah. He played with us till he was 36, and your best mate, Grant Birchall, we got 2 years out of him when he had played 3 games in 3 years previously. Well, might have been more than 3, but it wasn't too many more. Marcus Adams, we finally, had him up and running after an injury-riddled time at the Bulldogs.
Yeah, and the injury that ended his career wasn't one that he was struggling with personally.
No, it was an impact injury, and you can't do anything about that.
Exactly.
We got getting back to Dane Beams, we got him up and running and playing all Australian level football for a couple of years after a knee injury.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he was really up there as he was our best player at that time for sure.
Oh, yeah,
but he was top 5 as well at the time of when Dusty was in his prime.
Yeah, well, that's right, and he finished top 4 in the Brownlow 17 or 18. I think it was.
Yeah, it was around there. Yeah.
Yeah, and
just before he left.
Yeah, going into the last round, he was clear second, but then I think we must have lost that game, and he ended up being equal 4th or something like that. But
sounds about right.
Yeah, and that's all down to the fact that the medical guys got his body right when it hadn't been right initially.
Yep.
Charlie Cameron's foot, that was a bad injury. They got that right. He missed a lot of footy with that. Mitch Robinson's foot.
Yep.
And Mitch Robinson's a guy, really big, solid, heavy, not heavy as in fat, but heavy as in he's got a heavy set muscular physique. So foot injuries, it's like a horse having a foot injury. Yeah. It does take longer than the little guys. So they did wonders with that, got him back when they did.
Alan Christensen, they basically rebuilt him. Wasn't like his whole collarbone and shoulder metal now or something?
Yeah, so that was a shocking injury, and he did say to me at one point that it took him probably close to a year to not be scared on the footy field anymore.
Okay, yeah.
That he was going to get hit there again, and he was a pretty small guy too. But the credit really has to go to them too. So many and Rayner, Hipwood, and you can see the work they did with Sam Skinner, with the amount of times he did knees, and they kept getting him back and kept getting him fit.
Yeah.
So there's so much positive stuff, and with Andrew Crowell as well. I've got a good mate, Jordan. There's a shout out for you, Jordan. One of the nicest guys you'll ever meet if you ever do meet him. He knows Crowley in some way or another, and always, if we're at a women's game or a VFL game or even a couple of AFL games, we'll be walking along, talking away, and he'll go, "Oh, okay, Crowley," and Crowley, "Hey, Jordan, how you going?" Like, "Oh, well done." Not as good as Greg Swan coming up and shaking my hand at the women's grand final last year when the cheer squad were waiting to go onto the oval, but just big noting myself here.
I was having a little quick. That reminded me of a very quick story. I went to a VFL game. I think it was it was like north side of Brisbane or something. Maybe it's Moreton Bay or something like that. And I took one of my kids up there. This was beginning of last year. This was it was the year before, because it was just before Darcy Wilmot debuted and he was playing in the VFL and I was watching him.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was running around to get some food with my little ones, and we didn't recognize anyone as we were walking around, but my little one ran into a grown up, and I was kind of looking down at my kid, and I looked up to say sorry. Well, sorry, mate. Like my kid's just a bit crazy at the moment. And it was Andrew Wellington, and he was the nicest
Oh,
guy. He was
he
the
is,
nicest guy. He
yeah,
was so nice and so understanding.
he
And he's just like, "Oh,
is
that's all right, mate."
an amazing guy. He comes and sits with fans at the women's games and VFL games when he's there.
Yeah.
He'll just go sit with random fans and start chatting away to them. And
Oh, he was so nice.
yeah, he is. Yeah, he's so good for our football club. Yeah, we haven't always had the best of people at the top.
Yeah.
But the support the support he gave to Chris Fagan during the racism saga.
Yep.
Regardless of what your opinion is on whether it happened or whether it didn't happen or who was responsible, that's beside the point. In this instance, it's the fact that you want the guy at the head of your football club to support the guys within your organisation.
Yeah.
And he did it passionately.
Yep.
Yeah, like the speech he gave at the club champion night, like there were tears amongst a lot of people.
Yeah.
Because he was passionate about what he had to say, and you knew he would be in the trenches for anyone at that football club.
Yeah, it's rare that you get a guy in a position like that where you can feel that they genuinely care about it, and it's not just something that they want to put in their resume for a couple of years before they move on to something else. Like I never get that impression with him. I can feel his genuine care and passion. And it's because, you see him at local, you see him at VFL games, you see him at AFLW games, and he's just, he's not all dressed up. He doesn't have a big sign above his head saying, I'm a big wig and come check me out. He's just there in his casual clothes, just genuinely watching because he's genuinely interested.
Yeah, well, that's right. And he's like really down to earth. And
Yes.
I sort of rate him and Peggy at Richmond, Peggy O'Neill, I think. I rate them two as probably the two best, I guess, people in that position. What are they, the president, CEO, whatever they are? The two best in football, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because they are both people of the people, but they're also the sort of people that are going to go to war for their football club if they're attacked.
And that's what you need.
Yeah, 100%. And it's not about them; it's about the people in their organisation, from person 1 to person 200.
Yep.
And
I agree completely.
Yeah, and they're also great with the fans.
Mm.
And as much as it kills me to say good things about Richmond, it's not a lie what I've said. So I guess back to the game. You got any other observations you want to bring up?
No, not really. Outside of my crosses.
I do want to say though, in my view, I felt that as much as Bailey hasn't had a good season so far, our structure changed without him, and we weren't able to much similar in a way with Kitty, but not on the same scale. We weren't able to sort of adjust to not having him there.
Yeah.
Because even when he's not in form, he's still potentially dangerous.
Yeah.
And opposition coaches and opposition players are aware of him when he's there, whether he's in form or not.
Yeah, and I've just realised something. So we've played, that was round 6, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So we've played 7 games technically. Well, there's 6 games because there's a bye.
Yeah.
So out of the 6 games we've played, in 5 of them we've lost to player injury.
Yeah.
So that's something to keep an eye on.
And that's it. And look, you could say that we have trouble adjusting to not having a particular player out there if they get injured during a game. I feel like every club's going to have that problem. Like Geelong, as soon as Tom Stewart went off, their heads dropped a bit, their fans. But
yeah, definitely.
They obviously won the game in other areas, and he wasn't having a particularly great game. But again, like I said about Bailey, he's a dangerous guy who could turn a game in the blink of an eye.
Yeah.
A couple of huge intercepts, or they swing him into the mid for a couple of centre bounces, and he pumps it inside 50. And so obviously it should have benefited us not having him on there, but that threw out their structure a little bit. But then they had Zach Guthrie, who's a bit of a lesser light, stand up, and he had a pretty good game.
He did, yeah.
Yeah, it was also probably helped by the fact that wet conditions don't suit 6'7" guys.
No.
And also our forward structure was thrown out. No Bailey, no Danaher for big chunks of the game because he was playing another role.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah, it all got thrown out the window, and
Yeah.
it was we struggled to adjust a little bit.
yeah, so my whole thing was at first it was, well, I'm not angry, I'm just disappointed. Then that changed. Well, I'm not angry, I'm not disappointed, I'm sad and upset that we didn't win, but
Mm.
we could also have quite easily have won had those posters or not the rush ons, but those posters been goals.
Yeah, well, it's 17 scoring shots to 18 scoring shots.
Yeah.
In favor of the Cats. So it was a pretty even game, and it was an even game until arguably about halfway through the third quarter or so.
Yep.
Anyway, we should probably move on to ticks and crosses. Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess I'll go first with the ticks.
Sure.
And I changed it around a little bit, but the first one I do want to say, my first tick is all the people in the crowd, and that's from both teams, that obviously mostly us because we had the majority, who stuck it out in the rain and stayed sitting in their seats.
Yep.
With ponchos on and whatnot, everything else. Like I was watching and my first thought was, there's not many in the crowd tonight. And I was a bit disappointed. Then I thought, well, hang on. Would I be sitting out in the rain like that when it's that heavy? I've sat in the rain, but not when it's that heavy.
It was over 30,000 attendance, so it wasn't a
they gave it
game.
Like I think on TV they said 30,300 or something.
Yeah, it was just a tick over 30.
Along those lines, yeah. And look, Geelong's obviously not going to draw a massive crowd up there, like say your Richmonds or your Carltons or your Collingwoods. But also the weather conditions. I mean, yeah, a lot of people would have stayed home, and you can't hold that against them. But those who did stick it out, I'm giving you all a fist bump right now. That was awesome.
Yeah, my six were there, and we stayed to the final siren. Unlike some people that were around us didn't stay, but anyway, we'll get to that.
Yeah, well, I know a few good friends of mine stayed there because they were sending me videos of the rain throughout the game, and others were posting videos on Facebook. People I know as well. So, yeah, like, well done to those guys. You've got my respect.
Yep.
So my next tick, and it's unfortunate that this is the shortest period of getting a tick in a game that any guy who's got a tick this year has gotten. But Big O, the first quarter, he was back.
Yep.
He was on fire. He was dominating. He was getting clearances. He was sharking balls in the ruck. He was getting down back. He was taking marks. He hasn't taken that many marks this year, but he was taking marks in this game. I don't know the exact amount off the top of my head, but two of them, he got at least 2 intercepts. And he was just absolutely on fire. Best game of the season for him. And I may talk about it again a bit later. You have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so similar to yours, the two. Do you remember me saying a couple of weeks ago where it felt like most of the team had they'd woken up for the season, they'd turned on, they'd engaged, they'd kind of gotten back to where they used to be, but there was a couple of players that I felt hadn't. Oscar was one of the ones I mentioned.
Yeah,
Zach Bailey was another.
Yeah.
And we also kind of had question marks on Fletcher a little bit. Those were kind of like the three for us. So it was good to see Oscar he was back, and it was good. So hopefully he can maintain that. I mean, he's not out for a long-term injury, so
no,
he'll be back in either. Well, he probably won't be. I doubt he'll play the Giants game, but he should be back the week after that.
It depends on what the result of the concussion test was, but he did look a bit dazed when he was on the bench. Like you could see him, blinking his eyes and sort of flicking his head around to try and get his vision right. And
because we play on Thursday, they may even if he didn't get an official concussion through a concussion test, they may just give him a week just to
because the short turnaround.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and look, Darcy Fort can come in and he's not going to lose anything for us. I don't feel.
Yeah, well, I have an interesting thought about that. If he doesn't if he doesn't come in. We'll get to that after when we do our quick touch on our the upcoming Giants game. But
Yeah,
I have an interesting theory about.
I think I know where you're going to go with that, but
Yeah, I think you might.
I will wait. So
Yeah.
my next tick is Ryan Lester.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I thought he played really well on Jeremy Cameron. A lot of Cameron's disposals and possessions of the ball were in their back line. He had to push up the ground a lot.
Yeah.
He wasn't really. I think he might have kicked one goal, if that.
Yeah.
For a guy who's supposedly the best player in the comp, kicked 6 the week before, he wasn't overly effective. And I have my thoughts on Jeremy Cameron as well, on an incident involving him and Hugh McCluggage.
Hugh McCluggage or Harris Andrews?
No, he tripped Hugh McCluggage.
Oh, you're talking about like the current.
Yeah,
the
last night.
Game. Yeah.
Tripped him up.
We're talking about history there.
And then grabbed the back of his head and slammed his face into the grass a couple of times.
Oh,
and
good. I didn't see that one.
And he also, at the start of that passage, he also clipped him in the side of the face of his hand. But look, benefit of the doubt, he was going for the ball. And then he got a 50-metre penalty, which I still don't know what he got it for because I was probably too busy raging. And then I had someone message me today. Actually, a good friend Jules messaged me. What did Jeremy Cameron get that 50-metre for? I don't think anybody knows.
No, and there's no explanation of the ground either. It's not like it pops up on the screen or anything. You kind of just have to talk to the people around you, and everyone I did was like, no idea. Even the Cats fans in front of me were like, yeah, no idea.
Yeah, and look, the umpiring was a bit hit and miss, but I'm going to let them off because it's hard enough job as it is without conditions like that as well.
Yeah, I thought there were some question mark calls, but there always is. I didn't think that they had a particularly fantastic or shocking game. They were fine.
Yeah, guys are gonna sort of struggle to control a wet and heavy ball, and guys are also going to slip in the wet and make contact when they probably weren't attempting to make contact. Yeah. So you give them the benefit of that in those conditions. So my next tick, and I mentioned this guy earlier, is Callum Archie.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't really go his way in the wash up, but he did have a go. Like we were saying earlier in the season, he just keeps trying.
Yep.
He presents, he gets himself where the ball is. He did take one or two sort of big, strong possessions sometime in the first half that made me jump out of my chair and go, "That's my boy."
Yeah, we love Cal here.
Yeah, look, I mean, how can you not? He epitomises the guy, the tradesman, in my opinion. He just keeps doing his job. He just keeps having a crack. And my final tick, just got to make sure that he's 5, is a guy you've brought up a fair bit this season, and I'm finally doing it, is Dane Zorko.
Yep.
He played it a little bit differently last night. He adjusted his game to the conditions better than anyone else on our team, I thought.
I agree completely.
And obviously he adjusted his game based on who the opposition were as well. That's in my opinion. He may listen to this one day and say, "Nah, mate, it was just some other complete different reason." But
I'd like to think the players listen to the podcast, but I'm not too sure.
Well, you never know. I'll just keep sending them links until they call the cops on me.
Yeah, that'll work long term. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not camping outside Joe Danaher's house in New South Wales like Don Fay does, but allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah, but I mean, Zorko, again, like we keep saying this every week, he's not having a career best season, but he's having a great season.
He's having, but probably not career best, but he's definitely having a better season than he's had in the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean,
so far.
2017 All-Australian Zorko was just phenomenal.
Oh, yeah.
But he's not quite obviously he's a lot older, but he hasn't lost a lot of his pace. He's still got pace. And as you've said enough times, he attacks when he's got the ball. He attacks when he hasn't got the ball. And his disposal's pretty reliable 99% of the time.
Yeah, I mean, he makes silly mistakes sometimes. He gets a little, white line fever and he'll do silly things. And give the ball away and things like that. But his heart is there, and he makes way more good decisions than bad decisions. Way more.
Have you got a pet dog by any chance?
Me, no.
Okay, have you ever had a pet dog?
Yeah.
A big one or a small one?
I've had all kinds, mate. I've had Dalmatians, I've had Rottweilers, I've had little poodles, I've had everything.
I've always had sort of medium to big sized dogs, but my folks have had a couple of smaller dogs, and the smaller dogs, when the big dogs are around, always bust and I won't say that word. They always bust their chops to prove that they're as big as the big dogs.
Yep.
And I think that's why some of these little guys like Zorko, Tuke Miller, Toby Green, they're not real big guys, but they sometimes have brain fades because they're trying a little bit harder to prove that they're as big as the big dogs. That's my theory. Doesn't mean it's true. I'm not the tallest guy in the world, and I don't feel like I need to prove myself. But then I'm not out there on the AFL field with millions of people watching me on TV either.
True.
I'm just a bloke sitting on my couch with a packet of corn chips and a blanket.
Sounds like a good night in, mate.
Well, it definitely was a Saturday night when everyone else was out in the wet. All right, well, yeah, so we'll get into the crosses.
Yeah.
Have you got your list all done now?
Yep. So I'm going to start with my first one. So the injury to Big O, obviously, we touched on it previously, but
yep.
It was so good to see him up and about, and he was having a fantastic first quarter. And obviously, him going out changed the whole dynamic of the team. So Jared Lyons came in. We had, Joe and Dunkley and a few other guys pinch hitting in the ruck, but they all had to go out of position, and it really threw a spanner in the works. But at the same time, I think you're better off having someone as more versatile as a sub, as like Jared Lyons, because you don't. We talked about this, I think, either last week or the week before.
Yeah, and Neil talked about it the other night as well. Yeah,
I mean, the biggest impact is losing one of your key position players, but you're more likely to lose, someone of, small forwards, like small defender, midfielder kind of size. There's more of those guys on your list, so you're more likely to lose one of them. So it's a better option to have someone who's around that mark to bring in. But at the same time, once you do lose, not like, if a key forward, a key defender, or a ruckman, it really does throw a spanner in the works, and it's a hard thing to prepare for. So, yeah, it's a big cross, and I mean, there's no one really to blame for it. It was a bit of friendly fire, but there was no one, it's no one's fault. These things happen.
Purely accidental. And one of the things, like, and I think it was Lee Matthews, I'm going to say it was, who said many years ago that big men don't get any smaller as the game goes on.
Yep.
And you don't realise how valuable your ruckman is until you haven't got him.
Yeah, exactly.
And we found it out because, like, we've had a pretty good run.
Yeah, I think so.
With Big O since he's become the number one ruckman.
Yep. Yeah, no, he's been fantastic.
Yeah.
I'll forever miss Steph Martin, but I do appreciate Oscar, and he's essential.
Yeah, and they're completely different players to each other as well.
Definitely.
Steph was almost an extra midfielder.
Yep.
Didn't like having shots at goal, but
he was so good in his prime, though.
I
miss him.
Such a great guy, but such a good footballer. It really burnt me to see him in the red, white, and blue for a couple of years as well. All right, so what do you got next?
Yep, so my second one is failure to adapt to the wet weather footy.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something also we've touched on previously, but Geelong seemed like they were able to flip a switch. I mean, it was pretty even through till about halfway through the third quarter in terms of output from both teams, and there were skill errors and execution problems and all that sort of stuff for both sides. And I mean, they kicked 9-9, so they didn't have a fantastic game either. But it did seem like they were having a better time adjusting to the wet weather footy, kicking the ball off the ground a lot. I mean, they got really lucky with a lot of where those balls went, because they always seem to go to a benefit position, even though they were just running and they would just kick it. Didn't even look like they were planning on where they were kicking it. They just kicked it, and it always seemed to work out for them. So, I mean, they had a better night in terms of that sort of stuff, but it felt like at no stage where we like, all right, well, we need to change our game plan and we need to start playing this way instead of that way. We kind of just had the one strategy and we kind of just stuck with it for the whole game, and it didn't work for us.
Yeah, and they had that ability to get guys out on their own a little bit more than what we did.
Mm.
I thought our defenders did pretty well, but all things considered, but yeah, keeping the opposition to what was it? How many goals did they kick? 9.
They kicked 9 and scored 9 behinds. Yeah,
and that's not a bad effort to concede nine goals. But then in those wet conditions, and I look, it's hard to tell when you're watching on TV as well because they put filters over it. It looks lighter, like it looks like the lights are brighter, and also it looks at points it looked like it wasn't raining. But then when they pointed the camera up a second later up at the big towers or whatever the lights are, you can see it was pouring. Like,
it was thick, man.
Did it get heavier in the second half?
Yes.
So maybe like that correlation there is as it got heavier, Geelong got better, and we just didn't grow those webbed feet that they grew.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's hard to tell, but it looked like there was not much of an effort to try and change the way we were playing.
Yeah,
and I just think that you could see the adaptation in real time with Geelong. So
and that's been a criticism, reasonable or not, of our coaching group over the years.
And it's one I've made myself. I'll out myself and be honest about that.
I made the same thing as one of my crosses after the opening round, but then you look back at last week where our coaching staff clearly outcoached Goodwin and his crew. So yeah, it's one of those frustrating things, I think.
Yeah, it seems to be that if things are going well, obviously the strategy we have is good, and if we can build some momentum, it usually works. But if things change and something unexpected happens, then that seems to be when the spanner gets thrown in the works, and then it's harder for them to change the style, and then that's when we tend to have a bad game after that.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. We'll see what the future holds. But my third cross is to the fans of the game that were leaving early. It's a big bugbear of mine. I know it's one of yours as well.
Yes.
And they weren't leaving because of the rain. So let's they were leaving because they could see that the game was starting to turn, and this was happening roughly about. I saw it start at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and there was a slow trickle out right through to the end of the game. So I stayed. I always stay no matter what's happening. If it's 150-point thrashing and it's hailing, I'm going to stay, just on principle.
Yep.
But yeah, there was a lot of people around us that left, and it was the area that we sat in. We didn't have reserved seats because I don't have my membership anymore. But my dad bought 6 just general admission tickets, so we were sitting in a pretty 50-50 Geelong fan, Brisbane fan area, and at the final siren, it was just the people I was with and a group of Geelong supporters. All the Lions fans had gone around us.
Yeah, well, I had a similar thing when we played Hawthorn at the MCG last year. Midway through the third quarter, there was this massive exodus.
Yeah.
And, look, maybe they needed to catch a train or something. But
there was a few of them that were using the excuse that, we'll go now so we're not caught up in the bus queue. And it's like, well, you're going to get caught up in the bus queue anyway. Like,
yeah,
what's an extra 10 minutes? Like,
because
seriously.
the volume of people leaving at this moment and factoring in the wet weather and everything else.
Mm.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that as a cross. It really, really gets on my goat.
Yep. And another cross is the fans online. Understand people being upset. I understand people having specific ideas about how things could have been changed. I mean, I had my own critiques, but making personal attacks on individuals and the coaching staff and all that sort of stuff, it's kind of poor form. I mean, you can say, look, this player didn't play well. I don't really rate this player. But when you start to get a bit more personal and you start to wish bad things upon certain individuals, that's just a no-go zone for me, and it always has been.
Yeah, and I'm going to throw an extension to that. And this is not our fans. This is just people online in general during the week. Some of the comments directed at Charlie Cameron were, some of them were pretty. Look, I don't like to drop the R word, but they were racist. Like, they weren't just saying things about him because he's a footballer or because he's a guy. It was specifically targeting the fact that he's an Indigenous person.
Yeah, it's
And
poor form.
yeah, that's not on. Like, it's 2024, guys. Just like pull your heads in.
Yeah.
You know, it's not 1960s anymore. Robert Menzies isn't our prime minister. We don't have the White Australia policy or the stolen generation happening anymore.
Mm.
We are all equal.
Yep,
Get it into
100%.
your thick skulls.
Yep, I fully support people, voicing their displeasure and, saying, pointing out things that they thought could be done better and their frustration. Look, I even, calling out a specific player and saying, I don't think they had a good game or this is the mistake they made. All of that stuff's fine. But if you get into, threats and personal attacks and all that sort of stuff, that's just no go. It always has been, always will be.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah. And my last cross is kind of tied to something we were talking about before. So we're basically every single game bar one, we've lost a player to injury. That's not really anyone's fault. It's just it's bad luck. I mean, I have complete faith in our medical team. We've had a really good run of injuries or lack of injuries in the last couple of years, barring a few exceptions. Our list has been pretty lean compared to a lot of other teams.
Yeah.
Sorry, our injury list has been lean compared to other teams. But we seem to be having some really bad injury luck so far this season. So
Yeah.
obviously that's a reference to Oscar McInerney this week, Zach Bailey last week, Connor McKenna going down, Kadeem Coleman going down,
Lockie Neal.
Lucky Neal, but he's kind of come back and and then obviously Tom Duday losing him as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just kind of taking its toll, isn't it?
You can't discount look at, obviously Richmond are a rebuilding team this year, but they've been savaged by injuries to top line mature players, and they're really suffering for it.
Yeah.
It's been other clubs in other years where you've looked at them and just gone, like, I really feel for those guys as much as I don't want them to win any games.
Yep.
I don't want them to lose every game because they've got 18-year-olds on the field either.
Yeah, that's the thing is there's certain teams that I really hate, and it's Collingwood and Richmond, but I don't want them to perform poorly based on someone getting hurt. I just want to be better performing than them.
Yeah, and the other thing too is if you got the best guys on the field on your team and the other team's got the best guys on the field from their lineup and you beat them, to have bloody good as a feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like that Richmond final that was a massive game. The final couple of years ago where Joey kicked the backwards goal and sealed it for us. Yeah, that's still one of my favorites because it was like they weren't performing poorly. It was both teams were giving it their all, and we just got over the top.
Yeah,
that was a great game.
Yeah, and even the game a week later against Melbourne, both those two games were absolute crackers. Both sides gave it everything. That's what you want from. That's what you want to see. Obviously, you want to win, but you want to see them win. Because they're working their asses off to beat the opposition. Not because they're witches' hats. And I'm just going to add one more tick that I just remembered. And
sure,
I didn't write this on my Facebook last night before I went to bed because I thought I'll wake up to a few comments. But this morning I got up and the first thing I did, I picked up my phone and I wrote, well, at least we didn't lose to the Eagles. That's a big tick.
Yeah. Well, at least we got to try and stay on top of that for, whenever we play them in a couple of weeks because they're starting to look good now.
Yeah, we play them over there as well. But like Elliot Yeo, obviously it's the injury thing. He had a lot of injury troubles for a few years.
Definitely.
He's got himself injury-free now. I mean, he would have stayed injury-free the whole time if he kept playing for us. But
yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of massive injury lists, the Eagles have been shocking.
Yeah, that's right. And but I reckon you're going to tell me something about Henry Smith.
I am, yeah. So should we touch on the VFL? Actually, should we do a player of the round first?
Yeah, so yeah. You go first. I went first last time, so you go first this time.
Okay. So mine's a little bit of a surprising one, bit of left field. I think you might think, but once I do my little brief explanation, I think you'll understand.
Yep.
So it's Noah Answorth for me.
Yeah.
I thought he really stood up, and he's been really good the last couple of weeks. I know that there's a guy on Reddit who, in the Brisbane Lions subreddit, that's a big Noah Answorth fan, and he's been calling for him to come in basically non-stop. He was fantastic last night. I think he had a couple of really good moments where he was basically the goalkeeper. He was the last man on the line, and he stopped a few goals personally.
Yep.
He did a lot of really good things, and his effort was, through the roof. Him and Dane Zorko were honourable mention to Dane Zorko, probably would have been my second option. But those two guys, I feel like they didn't stop the entire night, and they just gave it everything.
Yeah, well, I had Answorth in my ticks, and then I remembered Zorko played.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I've had Answorth in a couple of times lately because, like, yeah, his body of work since he's come back into the side, he's undroppable in my opinion.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I think he should be, but we know how the team structure usually works, and he's one of the more recent ins. So
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see how that goes for him.
yeah, and I guess when you get, because I wasn't able to get my hands on an actual proper replay of the VFL, I was able to watch it on my phone, but it was like when you watched it at Buffett a lot.
Oh, it's so choppy and poor
So,
quality, isn't it?
so I don't have an accurate gauge on Connor McKenna's game.
Yeah, I don't think he's busting the door down.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't drop. I certainly wouldn't drop Answorth for him just for the sake of it.
Oh, look, I wouldn't drop Answorth for anyone. And to think 2 or 3 years ago, you would not have heard me say that because I felt that his decision making and kicking at the time still needed to develop. I won't say it was shocking, but because that's unfair. It was more that it needed to develop. And again, he was only like 19, 20, 21 at the time. So
Yeah.
No one makes good decisions at that age. I know I didn't.
No, I certainly didn't either.
I mean, I can't remember what decisions I made because it was 100 years ago, but
Well, I suppose I was a dad at 22, so
there you go.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So I think we'll move on we'll do a really brief VFL just because
I'll give my player of the week too.
Oh, sorry, I thought you already did. Apologies.
No. So mine is also a little bit left field because he only played about maybe 30 minutes of football, and that's the big O.
Yep.
No need to explain why. Just he was the most up and about he's been all year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I said before, it's definitely felt like it was the game where he was kind of coming back into his own. What we know he's capable of.
Yeah, and look, if a guy can get 3 Brownlow votes for kicking 3 goals in a quarter and doing nothing for the other 3, then a guy who gets subbed out because he got unfortunately injured, he can get my player of the week because he was by far, if you look at that quarter he played, that was by far better than any other passage of football that anybody else played for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were +6 clearances at that stage when he got injured, and then we just fell away after that.
Yeah, and Geelong's clearance game generally isn't as strong as most other top 8 teams.
Yeah.
Yeah, they started to get on top in the clearances. And look, you can't discount young, fast legs in the wet weather of. I mean, it kind of made me sick the way the commentators have gone on about Max Holmes, but like his speed in the wet was unbeatable.
Yeah.
Can I actually add a cross?
Yeah, go for it, mate.
I sent you a message about this bloke early in the game, and
yeah.
Luke Darcy. I mean, look, I go 50-50 with the Duke. Sometimes I think he's good. Sometimes I think he's an idiot, and he's a product of the old father-son factory, and he's a South Australian and private school boy. So we, make of that what you will. And he's I think he still is on Triple M, but I thought last night, like he was the lead commentator, and you know what I was thinking to myself during the game? Where the hell is James Brayshaw right now?
Say that again.
No, I don't want to. don't make me say it again, please. When you start reaching for for that guy to come back.
Yeah.
Luke Darcy was sexually harassing guys with his words.
I'll take your word for it, though. I was at the game and I probably won't watch the replay. So,
No, and you couldn't even sync SEN to it either because
no.
they weren't covering the game. They were covering the other game.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
they
so
did one at a time. Huh?
it was Triple M, 3AW, and the ABC last night.
Yeah, I guess so. That makes sense. Yeah.
That's
geez.
it. All right, so I'm not going to interrupt you again.
No, you're right. Sorry, I didn't even register that you hadn't given your player of the week. We'll go through a really quick VFL wrap up, and then we'll do a really quick preview of the upcoming match. But it'll probably just be me for the VFL because you said you hadn't seen it. Is that right?
Yeah, I sort of watched it, but it was too patchy for me to get an accurate gauge on a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, I showed you. I filmed my screen and I sent it to you to show you what I was dealing with, and there was no exaggeration when I tell you that it's literally a guy running with a ball, and then it freezes, and then it catches up for 3 seconds, and then he doesn't have the ball anymore, and it's got an opposition's got the ball, and it's like, what happened?
And the way the commentary was cutting in and out, it was like you're listening to something on Bluetooth and you're too far away from it.
Oh, it was unreal. Like, it was unwatchable. But saying that, I did watch it. I did tough it out. It was a pretty even game. We went down by 3 points, I think it was. Let me just double check that.
Yeah, it was.
It was 3 points, 67 to 64 for us. So, yeah, it was pretty even. They kicked 9 goals 13. We kicked 9 goals 10. It was a pretty scratchy game, which is kind of funny because both feline teams. But
I see what you did there.
Yeah, you see that, yeah. But no, it was pretty good. I mean, there was a few. There wasn't really any standout players. I guess everyone was kind of just doing an all right job. Some of our best players actually were some of the VFL listed players or like rookies on our team. So Bruce Revel was listed as one of our best. Got 25 disposals. I think there's a chance that he might debut later in the season, which I didn't necessarily think would happen when he was drafted. I don't know. I think he's one to keep an eye on because he's been getting better and better every week.
I think consistent is the word I would come with Revel.
Yeah, and then Kyle Dunkley was having a pretty good game as well. And surprisingly, Dara Joyce had a pretty good game, but as a defender, he had 25 disposals. So
I did see that, and I did sort of see around the traps his name getting mentioned a bit.
Yeah, so he's one to keep an eye on as well. Obviously, we've seen him in the senior team a few times, but you never want your defenders to have a huge amount of disposals. So there was a lot of opportunities that were blocked going down this, which was pretty good. I was kind of looking out for Logan Morris to see if he was going to pop his head up again, but he had another pretty quiet week like he did last week.
Yeah, did he got sort of around about the 10 disposal mark or something along those lines?
14, and he got it behind, so he didn't have a blinder of a game.
Yeah.
And Dev Robertson was statistically our worst player for the game.
Yeah, so what happened with him? He apparently got copped a knock in the late second quarter.
I think so. I think he finished the game though, but I could be wrong on that. I don't think he got taken out.
So someone who is pretty close in with the VFL team, a supporter, she runs their Facebook group, the Lions Reserves Facebook group, said that he did disappear from the ground and come back wearing civvies, not even the polo. So
yeah, interesting. Yeah. Maybe he got pulled out because he was going to be an emergency or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe. But
I'm not sure what the story was there, but he had statistically a very poor game, but maybe he didn't finish the game. So yeah, like you said. Look, there wasn't really much else. There was no real kicking the door down kind of players.
I had Brandon Ryan go. He got 1 goal.
Yeah, no, 1 goal and 9 disposals. He was all right. He was. I don't think he's kicking the door down though, and I don't think many were. Another one that was kind of interesting though is remember how earlier in the year I read out our VFL list?
Yeah,
and I was talking about all the guys that were technically listed as VFL players that could come in and play a game throughout the season. There's a guy who wasn't on that list who ended up playing for us, and it was Zach Bailey's brother, Rowan Bailey.
Okay.
Yeah, so that one kind of came out of nowhere. I didn't think that was allowed because I thought you had to declare those players at the beginning of the season and they had to be listed as VFL players. So that was
Oh,
announced just before the game that he was playing, and he didn't have a fantastic game. He had 7 disposals, and that was about it.
yeah, I don't even know anything about his football, to be honest.
I didn't know he existed until the announcement before the game. But he's an overage player, so he's not. It's not like he's coming through the draft this year or anything like that.
Yeah,
He's a mature age player, so he's just growing on the growing list of brothers that are being chucked into the VFL team.
yeah. So, um, yeah, I don't know. I think I knew that he had a brother, but
Hmm.
yeah, didn't know he was a footballer. But yeah, look, I don't know about the declaration of players on. I think you can sort of because I know just with Williamstown down here, I know they it's not really a feeder club, but there's a Williamstown team in the amateurs, and I know some guys come and go from that team sometimes,
Okay.
and they're not really guys that I really know much about.
Hmm.
And obviously, you got academy guys that come and go from Brisbane's VFL as well.
Yeah. So let's move on to previewing the next game. So round 7.
Yep.
Obviously Anzac Day is this Thursday.
Yes.
And we are playing one of the 2 Anzac games, which we haven't had an Anzac game in a few seasons, I don't think.
Yeah, I reckon 2014. I'm gonna say.
I think we had one a bit later than that because I remember there was a couple of years ago we had we had an Anzac Guernsey a couple of years ago, and I think you only get Anzac Guernseys if your team actually plays on Anzac Day, right?
No, I think for a couple of years everyone did one, or
Okay.
not everyone, but it was a choice. But so
Yeah.
the last one I can remember was we played St Kilda in Wellington
Oh, geez.
in New
Okay.
Zealand. So around about
Was that Anzac Day? I remember the game, but I don't
yeah,
remember. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
so I was somewhere. I'm not going to say where I was because that would just open a can of worms. But I was
Yeah.
at a function with some people I know, and they had the footy on the Essendon and Collingwood game,
Yeah.
the traditional game. They had a barbecue for that or
Yes.
whatever, and um, yeah. And then afterwards, they were sort of like, "Oh yeah, let's just crank the music and that." And I'm like, "Hey, hand up!" And there's all these much bigger people than myself, and I was just like, "Hey guys, can we watch the other game?"
Yeah.
And one of us around going, sorry, buddy, St Kilda. And I'm like, hey, yeah, but my team's playing them.
Yeah.
And I had to buy him a couple of beers to get him to put that game on TV. So that sticks in my memory. It's the last one I can remember.
Mm.
But yeah, maybe we had one or two after that.
But you know what? Something like, we're very anti-gambling on here.
Yeah.
But I do like to look at the odds occasionally because it's a gauge of, what the general public thinks that, is going to happen for the game.
Yeah.
Because that's how they work out the odds is, how many people place to bet. And then they kind of go, that's how they work it out anyway. So we are technically the favorites for this game, which I think is really strange considering we're 12th. We've had a pretty ordinary start to the season. The Giants are doing really well, and it's a home game for them.
Yeah.
And we are technically, it's minor difference, but we're technically tipped as the favorites for the game.
Yeah. And look, the Giants lost, but they lost to a team in the top 3.
Yeah. I mean, they were getting talked about, and the lead up to that game, a lot of the podcasts that I was listening to for like just general AFL, Fox Footy podcasts, people were tipping them to be the premiership favourites at that stage.
Oh, yeah. And like, whenever a player got interviewed and they'd be like, oh, who's your tip for the premiership? It's like, oh, yeah, the Giants are the hottest team in the comp at the moment.
Mm.
And we were talking earlier about Toby Green, but like Tom Green, I reckon he's dropped off a little bit in the last couple of weeks too.
Yeah, he has.
Yeah, he was talked up as being the best player in the comp at the start of the season.
Mm.
Caniglio's missed a couple of games, and I don't know if he'll be available against us, maybe. But yeah, maybe they're just basing it on the fact that, well, Hogan and Green Toby Green are suspended, Sam Taylor's out, although they had a couple of young guys come in, play down back that looked okay against Carlton. Obviously, Curnow and Mackay are tough opponents to play, especially when it's probably your first or second game.
Yep.
So, yeah, look, I don't know. I don't think we should be favourites. It's an away game as well.
Yeah, I just thought it was peculiar. So we're at $1.90 and they're $1.94, so it's not much of a difference.
Nah,
But it's still interesting that we technically are, because I would have thought we've been heavy underdogs.
yeah, and like we were the favourites against Geelong, which again I don't know why, because they were undefeated and we'd won too. So it's really weird. And like, look, I'm not anti-gambling per se, but I'm anti-gambling advertising.
Yeah.
I think it ruins a lot of people's lives, and I'm not going to stand back from that. And a lot of abuse that players cop online comes from people who have lost money from gambling.
Yep, I completely agree with that, and that is one of the reasons that I'm pretty against it.
Yeah,
there's a few different reasons for me, but I mean, yeah. But I do look at the odds sometimes, and it's kind of hard not to, because I'm literally on the AFL website and I'm looking at the fixture, and it's an implemented feature, Sportsbet, right in the middle of the line. So I go on the AFL website to find out who's playing who, when, what time, what round, what stadium, etc. And then it's just forced upon you in the middle of the screen. I didn't seek out the odds. It's just right in front of me on the AFL website.
And if you listen to SEN or watch even Fox Footy and Channel 7, it's the ads just are constant. Good. Yeah, all right. So what do you want to – do you think there's going to be any changes for – obviously, we already discussed Big O probably will miss.
Yeah, so, I mean, we haven't – at this stage of recording, we haven't heard whether he passed or failed a concussion test. But if I was the club and it's such a short turnaround to the next game and we have to travel, I wouldn't be risking it. I'd be giving the week off just in case.
Yep.
And then I think most people would think that this is where I'm going to make my bold prediction that I touched on earlier. I think a lot of people would go, okay, well, Darcy Fort in because he's played a few games as the backup to Oscar. I can't recall if he's ever completely taken over as the main guy before, but he's definitely coming as backup.
He has. I think there was a game over in Freo. Okay. And also I reckon it was one of the finals one year.
Okay, yeah, I can't recall. But my bold prediction is that Henry Smith is going to make his debut as a Brisbane Lions player.
Yeah, look, we brought it up, I think, last week or the week before. He was in emergency 1 week.
Yep.
So he's obviously front and center in their thinking.
Yep.
And
that's my bold prediction, is that he's going to come in for the Thursday game as a on-the-field player, not an emergency.
Yeah, I don't hate it at all. The guy's been around the club long enough and he's worked hard enough. You can tell he works hard. You can see his football's improving.
Definitely. I mean, he's light and day compared to his first VFL season. I think this is the start of his third season.
Third or fourth, I think. But
yeah, but I think it's time. I think give him a chance. I think there's no better chance than now.
Yep.
We know what Fort can bring. I like Fort, but Fort's not a long-term player. And I think no better time than now to give someone like Henry Smith a shot, someone that we and the club assume is going to be a long-term option for the team.
Yeah, and look, put yourself in Darcy Fort's shoes. He's going to be disappointed if he's not the guy, but he's also knowing the little bit of contact I've had with him after VFL games or at a couple of club functions or whatever. The impression I get is he'd also be that guy that's going to be extremely happy for Henry Smith to be given a go.
Yep.
And that's part of the culture of our club.
Yep.
Like, other than probably Mitch Robinson, no one else has really spat the dummy if they don't get picked or if another guy gets picked in front of them.
No, and you don't want guys like that at your club.
No, you don't. You want, it's like you want to be happy for your mates if they get an opportunity. And yeah, look, I don't hate it. I think the Giants ruckman is that Kieran Briggs. I think.
Sure, to be honest.
Yeah, I think it's Briggs. I think his name is definitely Briggs, but he's there's probably only about 8 Giants supporters in the country, and I know 5 of them. One of them is a really good friend of mine, and the other, one of the other ones who you might recall from your Facebook days is an admin in a Facebook group we were both in. That was not the greatest place to be a member of, but
Yeah.
they both speak up Briggs. I'm pretty sure it's Briggs.
Yeah, right.
But and obviously Matt Flynn left the Giants at the end of last year because he wasn't getting the opportunities.
One of my best mates is a very, 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 very casual Giants fan. Like that's his team, but he doesn't keep up with the footy a huge amount.
Yeah.
And the reason that he picked the Giants, because he's a Queensland boy and always has been, is that a guy who is still in the AFL system but no longer plays for the Giants is related to his ex-fiance.
Okay, there you go.
So Kennedy at the Carlton.
Oh,
Matthew Kennedy.
Yeah, Matt Kennedy. Yeah.
Yeah, his cousin was engaged to one of my best mates, so that's how he picked his team.
And that Matt Kennedy is not a patch on the Matt Kennedy who played for the Bears and Lions either.
Yeah.
Maxie Kennedy was so unlucky to miss out on being a premiership player with us.
Oh, yeah.
We just had such a good playing list. But
Mm.
yeah, it's interesting. I would have thought that casual Queensland AFL supporters might go for the Giants because they're the rival of the team from Sydney.
Mm. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll always, if my team's out of contention, I'll always want to see, the three teams that haven't won a flag go for the flag. So obviously Suns, Giants, and Freo.
Screw Freo.
I knew you were going to say that.
Hey, I'm an eastern suburbs boy from over there, so
Yeah.
screw any team from the west, except yeah, and also East Fremantle, South Fremantle, and that sort of thing. But I Simon Black's from East Fremantle, so
That's true.
yeah, we'll take that.
You got a prediction for the game?
Yeah, look, I put into the ladder predictor that we lose this one.
Yeah.
But I think we could quite easily win this one as well.
Mm.
And history has shown that we've gone into games against the Giants at whatever the stadium in Blacktown's called these days and or Canberra, and we've won when we weren't expected to.
Yep.
So my prediction on here is going against what I said on the ladder predictor. And I'm going to be bold and say we win by 24 points.
4 goals. Okay.
Yep. And you know me, I've always been a 12 points or under guy all season.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah.
My prediction is going to be very different from my normal predictions as well.
Yep.
So I'm tipping a loss, to be honest.
Yep.
And I'm tipping a 3-goal loss.
Yep.
So, 18 points approximately.
I don't think, even one of those results is not overly unexpected. Because our best football will win the game, our very best football.
No, definitely. I mean,
but
I wouldn't be stunned if we do win. My heart tells me that this isn't going to be the one, especially, if Oscar's out and Bailey's still not back and, McKenna's probably not going to debut because they'd have to drop someone else for him because he's not going to come in to replace Oscar. And I just feel like, short turnaround from the really crappy game that we had on the weekend to traveling to Canberra with a big injury to an important player. And then, the Giants are playing well. I mean, they do have a few players out, but I just kind of weighed all of that up in my head. And I came to us losing by about 3 goals. I don't think we're going to get blown out of the park. But I just think it's just going to be a fairly close loss.
Yeah. So my thing. So I'll get to what you said about the short turnaround in a tick. But my thing goes back to what I said earlier. For Hogan, Toby Green, Sam Taylor, Caniglio aren't playing. That does give us a distinct leg up. It doesn't give us an advantage, but it gives us a leg up to possibly take advantage.
Yep.
But so
that's assuming that those two guys don't get off.
I'd be very surprised if Toby Green got off. Hogan, I expect to get off. I don't think there was a great deal. I don't even think he made contact, to be honest. But so on the turnaround now, they only have 4 hours less turnaround than us.
Yep.
their game finished about half an hour before ours started.
True.
So there's that, but they also got to travel back to their home state. They kind of technically, someone from Canberra, the one person from Canberra that listens to us, will be on all over me over this, but they're technically playing in their home state as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
It is a little bit of a travel, but I mean, it's technically a home game.
It's about 3 hours. I mean, it's probably only if I guess if our boys fly to Canberra, it's probably only about an hour and a half.
Yeah,
it's about 2 hours to fly to Melbourne, 3 hours to fly the other way. But but they're still, our boys are still played in the heavy conditions as well.
Yep,
and they do have to fly to Canberra.
Yeah.
It's going to be cold in Canberra, I'm assuming, because it always is.
Yep.
So
especially this time of the year.
Yeah, so the turnaround is about the same, but we do have that little bit of a disadvantage having played in the heavy conditions. And we were missing 2 vital cogs to our best 22, but they could be missing 4 of their most vital cogs as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's not even counting the ones that we'd already lost previously, Coleman, Ashcroft.
Yeah. Well, like Ashcroft, I don't count at the moment because he hasn't played this year.
Yeah.
He's probably just after the bye round, I think they've been saying.
Yeah, he's not far off. My dad went to an open training session because he's down at the moment. He's with my sister at the moment across town, but he was around my area last week, and I've said before that I live fairly close to Brighton Homes Arena. So Dad, while I was at work one day, just went down and went to an open training and got a picture of some of the boys. And he had a quick chat to Will Ashcroft, and he just said that he obviously wouldn't give an ETA, but he said he's not far off. And the way he was training, it looked like he wasn't far off. So that's good. And one last note before we go. So obviously we have a VFL game this weekend.
Yes.
We are playing Southport Sharks on Saturday at 1:05 p.m. So we're not doing a curtain raiser or anything like that. So not playing Giants reserves.
Yep.
Playing Southport, and Southport's usually a pretty good team, so I think that could be a tricky
match. So Southport. So a mate of mine, I think I've mentioned before, he's on the coaching staff at Port Melbourne.
Okay. Yep.
And they went up to Southport for a camp, or up to Gold Coast for a camp. Then did a practice match against Southport. Then played them again in the first round. And he was sort of saying like they're still good, but they're not what they were.
Yeah, I mean, looked at the ladder then, the VFL ladder, and they're about halfway up the ladder.
Yeah.
It's a massive ladder now that all those comps have merged together anyway. It's like 19 teams or something crazy.
Yeah.
But they're doing pretty well. I mean, and I've always respected how they've held their own really well. I mean, out of all the NEFL teams that came over, 2 of them have dropped off completely because I think NT Thunder didn't even make the merge. They just integrated.
Aspley went back to the
and Aspley did it one season and then they left and joined the Quaffle.
Was Redlands one of the other ones? Or?
Yeah. Are they still? No, they dropped off. So Redland Bombers, they're not there anymore. So a bunch of them dropped off. I think the only standalone NEFL club that wasn't tied to an AFL club that remains is Southport Sharks. But they're a strong club. They've always been a really strong club.
Well, like a lot of people down here, I don't know what the reporting was up there, but when the AFL said we're going to have a team on the Gold Coast, everyone down here was like, well, Southport's got 30,000, 40,000 members and they're a local footy club. Just get them in.
Oh, it was the stupidest thing that they didn't do that, to be honest, because even my dad and I had the same conversation. We just assumed that was what was going to happen because it seemed like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
But they were worried that what was the concern they had? It was something along the lines of they didn't think that it would have room for growth, and there was a lot of neutral fans that wouldn't have wanted to join the Sharks because, like, all the local guys that hate that club, they wouldn't have joined their membership in the AFL.
Yeah.
But so they wanted something fresh that didn't have a history of, we hate those guys, so we're not going to support them. So they thought it was going to be the thing that would, make them more successful and get more memberships, but I think it had the opposite effect. I think if they put Southport in the AFL, I think it would have had a much stronger start, and I think more people would have jumped on, and it would have been much more successful.
Yeah, Yeah, well, that's it. But, well, it's not the Southport Sharks fan cast.
No, no, I never thought we'd be saying that, but
Which brings me to, we do not get paid to do this, and
no.
we don't monetize this. We don't have advertising. We do this
Nope.
for our love of the Brisbane Lions, and I'm not gonna beg anyone to subscribe or listen or anything like that. But I do want to say we have now passed 6,000 as of tonight. 6,000 Spotify listens, and Spotify
UBD.
is now just over 40% of our total listenership. Apple's still up there in the high 40s as well.
Yeah, yeah, they're the
So,
two big ones.
yeah, and iHeart's dropped off completely. That's gone down to about 1%. So that one didn't work. But
Yep.
what do you do?
Yeah, look, I think we stick to our strengths and we just keep pushing through with Apple and Spotify. YouTube still, when it's not as successful on YouTube, but we'll keep that going for a bit and see how it goes. But if anyone's made it this far into the podcast, we appreciate you choosing to listen to us waffle on for a couple of hours every every week. And if you feel like leaving a review or a comment or a like, it's free to you, but it means a lot to us, and it really helps grow and get new people involved. So, and if you really like it, tell someone you know to chuck it on.
Yeah, and give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple, so that gets us to the front of the search when you type in Brisbane Lions as well.
Yeah, and we just appreciate anyone listening to, even if they don't listen to the whole thing, just anyone choosing to chuck our content on is always appreciated.
That's it. And I do believe that you're bringing a special guest on next episode, if not the one after.
Yeah, not confirmed, but because I haven't had a discussion with him yet, but I think he will be interested, and I think I'll be able to get it to happen.
All right. Well, we'll keep that under our hat. And also, I have got a very good Lions supporting guest coming on in the next couple of weeks.
Ooh, one we haven't had on before, or?
No, we haven't. But
okay, cool.
She messaged me today to say, thanks for giving me a shout out on one of your episodes.
Oh, beauty.
I couldn't remember which episode I mentioned her name, but I do remember doing it once. And I said, oh, well, how would you like to come on the show? And she's like, oh, what would I talk about? I said, well, pretty much the same thing as us.
Footy.
Yeah, just come in, tell us your name, why you go for the Lions, and then make the rest up like we do.
I always love. I think it's a great thing that we get guests on so often, and I hope our listeners like that as well. But even it's always good to just chat to new people, and I love hearing their background about how they got into footy.
Yeah,
it's different for everyone, and that's what makes it so great.
And that's the thing, like, because we've got Bears supporters, we've got Fitzroy supporters, we've got Victorians, we've got Queenslanders, we've got Tasmanians, South Australians, West Australians who support the club.
Everywhere. International fans.
We do, like. I've come across people on Facebook who live in Hawaii, Japan, America. There was someone in Iceland at one stage that was a Lions supporter.
Yep.
And obviously a lot of Americans, since the COVID stuff happened, have come onto the AFL. And because we've been a pretty successful club in that period, they've jumped on us a bit as well. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. All right, well, we should probably jump back in and wrap this one up, eh?
Yeah. So, you got any final thoughts? Anything else you might have forgotten?
Not really. We've previewed the upcoming game and the VFL game. I think, I'm going to claim my bold prediction of Henry Smith's going to debut on the ANZAC Day.
Yeah.
And that's either going to look really genius and prophetical, or it's going to look really silly. But we'll see. I think it should be a good game. It's going to be interesting to see how they go in Canberra. I think that's pretty much it. Anything else you want to add?
Look, I just hope that the boys go out there and have a crack.
Yep, that's all we ask.
Yep, I'm not asking anything else. And also, everyone, just get behind them. Just have faith that everything's in place. It's just got to click at the same time, which it did against Melbourne and it did against North. It'll do it. It'll keep clicking, and once it clicks and locks into place, toot toot, all aboard.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do us.
Yeah.
I got to go to work in a few hours, so
Oh, geez, don't envy that. I got to get up. Actually, I got a later start tomorrow, so that shouldn't be too bad. But we'll chat through the week, and
Yep.
it should be hopefully a good Thursday. I got a pretty packed Thursday actually because my dad's he's ex-military, so he's marching in the parade. That's one of the reasons he came down. So yeah, the busy day. Got to get up very early for dawn service, and yeah, so hopefully it'll be a good day.
we got a pretty strong military connection in my family as well. So I'm going to do the dawn service. The kids are doing something with their mum that day.
Yep.
So I'm going to do the dawn service and then go to the gym and absolutely punish the hell out of myself. And also, I will. This part I will include when we go to wear. So I just wanted to say as well. So Alex Witherden, former Brisbane Lion and one of my most loved players in the AFL still, is at the end of this season, I believe, in between the end of the season and the start of pre-season. Him and Dom Sheed and a couple of retired Eagles players are doing the Kokoda track.
Right, that's good.
Yeah. So yeah, Alex and Sheeda were on one of the other WA podcasts during the week, having a bit of a chat about it. So I might send you across a link. But yeah. Look, any Lions fans who still hold a little bit of love for Alex Witherden, whatever charity he's doing it for, send some money that way because Alex is a really lovely guy.
He is.
He's really into the history of the Kokoda track and what it means to our country as a nation. So he's doing it for all the purest and best reasons.
Yeah, that's great. It's good to hear.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's call it a night there, and I'll talk to you during the week.
Sounds good, mate. I'll see you in a few days. Well, I'll talk to you in a few days anyway.
Yeah, no worries. All right. Have a good one, mate.
You too, mate. Catch up.
All right. Cheers. See ya.